Welcome back to the Beauty Lab podcast. I'm Velia, your host, and today I will be interviewing my co-host Monina all about foundations. Today's episode is all about one of the most common beauty struggles, finding the perfect match for your foundation. So if you've ever stood in a store completely overwhelmed and you can't figure out what tone you are, what kind of foundation to even look at, what's a good quality, don't worry. Monina's got you covered. So grab a coffee or a tea and let's dive into the foundation of foundation. Welcome to the Beauty Lab podcast, your drive time resource for all things beauty, health, and wellness. We're your hosts and favorite beauty nerds, Monina and Velia.
Join us as we debunk myths, explore the latest trends, and dive deep into the science behind your favorite products. We'll interview industry experts and answer your burning beauty questions in 30 minutes or less.
Okay, so Monina, what are the things that we should be considering when we go shopping for foundations?
Yes, like you said in the opening of our show today, it is very overwhelming, especially when you're like at a store like Sephora and there's like a million tubes of different types of foundations.
Yes.
All right, so a couple of things to consider. There's a lot to consider, but I'm going to break down to kind of like the top 5 today.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about coverage level, skin type, lifestyle and climate, flash photography, because in the day age of selfies, it's important to talk about that. And then, of course, color matching or shade matching.
Okay.
Okay. So number 1, cover level. First, you need to ask yourself, all right, do I want a sheer, a medium, or a full coverage? And if you don't understand what that means, a sheer coverage means like the natural things like freckles and things still kind of show through. Mm-hmm. You're not trying to completely cover everything. So that's like a sheer coverage. If you're more on the medium side, you're just looking to balance out a few imperfections. Maybe you broke out and you've got some redness or you've got a little bit of post-hyperpigmentation, but you don't want to cover the face fully and like make it look flawless, which would be your full coverage or heavy coverage, as we say sometimes, where now you look like you've just been airbrushed. And there's like no discoloration, no imperfection. If you've got freckles, we've covered that all up. So that's your first consideration is full coverage, medium coverage, or sheer.
Okay.
Okay.
I have found that the coverage level is kind of influenced a lot by like current trends. Like I remember in the 90s, everybody was full coverage. In early 2000s, it was like everyone used MAC. I can't remember the formula of the foundation, but it was like their most full coverage. Like you couldn't see a pore. You couldn't even tell if that was like a robot under that foundation or if it was a real person. Yeah,
you're right. I mean, you can be influenced by that, but again, at the end of the day, it's preference.
Yeah.
I like to say people will gravitate towards sheer if they want that natural finish.
Yes.
And then for myself, I like the medium just because I do have my little bit of scarring. I still have some pigmentation from breakouts and things like that. So for me, medium is like my go-to all the time.
Okay.
And then full, I think the trend started, like you said, in the 2000s because when contouring became a huge deal, I feel like unless you had full coverage makeup on, the contouring just didn't look right.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So then people were like, okay, let me try the full coverage and see if the contouring looks better. And it does, because you can really see those sharp edges, and then when you blend it all in, it looks like flawless, and you get that cut, you know, in your cheeks and your jawline and all that kind of stuff. So yes, you can be influenced, but again, at the end of the day, it's your preference. Because think about it, when you look at prices of foundations these days, it's not cheap.
No.
You know, so if you're buying something that's for every day, I don't really see people do full coverage every single day. So yeah, for me, it's I always ask everyone, what do you want? Now for brides, even though they may not wear a lot of makeup or they normally wear more like a sheer, on their wedding day, they want to bump it up a little.
Right.
right? So again, that will dictate like what type of event. And for my brides, they want a little bit more of a flawless look, but not necessarily full heavy. Mm-hmm. So again, preference when it comes to the coverage. Okay, so the second thing to consider is your skin type. I'm going to dive deeper into that later, but definitely your skin type does dictate what foundation looks best on your skin. Okay, so just kind of put a pause on that one. The third one is lifestyle and climate. So obviously, if you live like in a humid area, or you're someone who exercises, or you're on the go all the time, then you're going to want to look for foundation formulation that says long wearing or sweat resistant. Words like that when you're choosing the formula. And then of course, if you're in a drier area, drier climate, then hydration's your best friend. Hydration is key for sure. So that will dictate the formulation. The fourth one to consider is if you're doing a lot of flash photography, or you're getting married, things like that. We always tell women to avoid heavy SPF formulations because it can have ingredients in there that can cause something called flashback. And that's why, if you've ever noticed, it's like you look in the mirror and your foundation looks great, but then you go do your flash photography, and next thing you know, you look at the photos and you have like this ghostly white finish, because it's taking that SPF ingredients like mica and things like that, and it's bouncing off your face.
So SPF could actually work against you sometimes. Does that break your heart?
Okay, for those of you who haven't watched the other episodes, because I talk about SPF all the time. Well, I mean, if it's your wedding day, you can go one day without the heavy SPF.
So I actually didn't know that SPF can actually create a ghostly white
finish.
Flash back.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
You just glam-bushed me. You just glam-bushed me. Wow. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, that's with flash photography. So just kind of keep that in mind. Those heavy SPF formulations. So maybe that's the day you don't wear a ton of SPF.
That one day.
That one day. Not every day.
No.
You know. So yes. So if you've been wondering, but it looks great in person or in the mirror, but in all my photos I look white, it's probably because it's got a lot of SPF in it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So the last one is in your shade matching. And this is usually for me the deal breaker. Like if it doesn't match or isn't close, and you see this line of demarcation, which sometimes we see, that means you chose the wrong color altogether. Now when you're shade matching though, a couple of things to think about that's super important is you want to test it on the face, not on your hands. Because obviously our hands and our face have different colors, right? So if you match it on your hand, you're matching for the hand. You're not matching for your face. The other thing to consider is my darker clientele will tend to have like a darker perimeter and lighter in the center. So I always ask them, do you want me to match the color in the center or the color on the outside of the face? Because it does matter. So if someone has really dark here, but it's lighter here, and this is what they want me to match, then I will swipe the color on the area I'm trying to match.
Okay, so that's really good advice for when you're at Sephora or you're at Ulta or whatever, and you're actually able to test the colors. So you're saying test the colors on a place on your face that's the color you want to match. So if you're trying to match your cheek, don't swipe it on your chin or your jawline, like, because normally I know that I've gone in to color match before, and whoever's helping you will tell you where to swipe it, and it's may not be the place that you want to swipe it.
Right. Most of the time, if your face, there isn't a big change from the forehead to the chin and the outer perimeter, you could probably just do the jawline, because that's what they'll say, is a swipe like right around the cheek down to the jawline. That way you're capturing both the cheek area and the jawline. That's fine. But if you have completely different colors on the face, then swipe it on the area that you want to match.
Okay.
Exactly. And a pro tip is, because we know that the foundation, when we're wearing foundation and we're matching like the face, our neck's going to have a different color. So what you want to do is, without adding more color or more foundation to your brush or your sponge, whatever you're using, you want to lightly blend it down past the jawline into the neck area. Because naturally, if you look at people's skin, it's a little, the color, the graduation of the color changes from the face onto the neck. So, so that's kind of just a little pro tip for you guys.
Okay.
To help match it, so you don't have that line of what we call demarcation.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Those are like the big 5 that
Okay.
I would love for you guys to consider when you're going out there looking for your foundation. Yeah.
Okay, so now there's another piece to this puzzle, right, with the undertones, because you always see these options of warm, neutral, cool. And cool doesn't always, at least in my mind, translate to what you might think when you think cool, because cool is like a pinky kind of undertone, right? So can you kind of talk about undertones and where those play into finding the foundation?
So a couple of things about your undertones. Your undertones are your undertones. It never changes. So I don't care if you've been tanning or the seasons are changing, your undertone is always going to be your undertone. And you're right, it's broken down into 3 categories. We have our cool, our warm, and like a neutral undertone. But the undertones are those subtle hues that are underneath the surface of the skin. And I'm going to give you a couple of tests so that you can figure out if you're a cool or a warm. And again, like we've always said in the past, if you have further questions, or we're more than happy to do a Zoom consultation too. So if you are totally still confused at the end of this, more than happy to jump on a call with you too. So keep that in mind. All right. So your undertones, cool, warm, neutral. You're right. With the cool, if you have more of a cool undertone, you'll see hints of pinks, reds, and blue. Okay. If you're more of a warm undertone, you will notice kind of golds, peaches, yellows in the skin. And if you look at your skin, you're like, I can't see any of those things, or I see all those things, and you're probably what we call neutral. And you can gravitate towards warm or cool, which is kind of what I am. And here's a couple of tests just in case you're still confused. If you look at your veins, you're either going to see blue and purple. If it looks blue or purple, then you're more on the cool side. If you see your veins and it's more green or olive, then you're going to be on the warm tones. So what do you see?
I see green.
You see green? Yeah, you're definitely on the warmer side. So sometimes it looks green and sometimes I see blue. And here's another test for you, besides the veins, is jewelry. So ask yourself, do I look better in golds or do I look better in silvers? And so golds definitely are more on the warm tones, silvers on the cool tones. If you look good in both, then you're probably neutral. Okay? So those are just some tips to figure out, okay, first, am I cool or am I warm? Okay. Another good tip for you guys is reading the formulation's names. So if you're looking for more of a cool formulation, you'll see words like cool, rosy, ivory, things like that. If the formulation has words like golden or warm or honey, then that's probably more on the warm undertones. So that's kind of where you're going to want to gravitate towards. If you see neutral or beige, it's usually for somebody who's more on the neutral side. But then again, you still want to do the color swiping. But this will help you kind of at least narrow down the shades that you're going to be testing on your face.
Exactly.
You don't have like hours on hours to try every single color on, but at least you can figure out cooler warms. So that hopefully helps. When choosing your formulation.
Yeah, definitely. That was a lot of really, really helpful information because it is so hard to go in and even know where to begin. So just so far to recap, you want to decide whether you want sheer, medium, or full coverage. Find your undertones. And what else?
Skin type. So we can actually talk about skin type.
Okay, so we haven't talked about skin type yet.
Right.
Okay, perfect. So far, those are the 2 heavy hitting points.
Yes, for sure.
So write that down if you can, or make a mental note. But before you do that, take a second, please, and just pause if you're listening or if you're watching on YouTube and hit subscribe, hit review, and just give us a little love. We really appreciate any feedback as well, and questions always. Okay, so last question that I have for you is, well, you kind of mentioned it already, is talking about skin type. So can you dive a little deeper into where skin type, first of all, what your skin type is, like what are the different skin types, and then the best kinds of foundations for those skin types?
Sure. So there's obviously different types of skin types. We'll put in the show notes, I have a quiz you can take to figure out if you're oily, if you're dry, combination, and then we have another category called sensitive. Now, sensitive is not a skin type, it's more of a condition, but a sensitive person can be oily, dry, or combination skin. But let's break it down first. If you have oily skin, your formulation should be more of a mattifying.
Okay.
You want to look for words that say long wearing, because obviously with the oilier skin, we tend to not want that shine, even though that's like a trend right now. I feel like everybody has this glow, which is great.
Glass skin.
Glass skin, glow, but we don't want to hear the words oily or shiny, right? We want it to be more, for us, with the oilier skin type, we tend to gravitate towards formulations that are more mattifying, have more of a matte finish, right? So you want that powder finish, matte finish. You want to avoid heavy creams or even that dewy finish. Again, this is preference though. If you've got slight oily skin but you want that dewy finish, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying, like, typically if for someone with oily skin, that's the last thing they want, is anything that looks shiny on their skin, right? And you want to avoid things that have too much of a dewy finish or a cream, because it can, believe it or not, it can slide off. And so you see, like, because as the heat of your body emulsifies the formulations, it can tend to move and slide around due to all the oils in the skin, okay? So that's your oily skin. If you have more dry skin, of course you want to gravitate towards formulations that have more hydrating ingredients. So a liquid form, usually, for drier skin, I always tell them choose more of a liquid foundation that has moisturizing ingredients like hyaluronic acid and glycerin. So you want more of a dewy formulation, dewy finish. For you, you want to avoid heavy powder foundation.
Okay.
Because powders come in all shapes and form, but you don't want like a pressed powder foundation for a drier skin, because they can settle into the pores or the fine lines and wrinkles and accentuate it. So that's why I want you to go more towards the liquids. If you have combination skin, you want more like of a satin natural finish. You can use things like stick foundations. You've seen like those sticks, which are really cool and handy to do. More of a like serum-based foundations or liquid foundation. You can even mix and match or spot apply, meaning like you can use more of a, if you're combination skin and you're super oily, maybe the oily parts you can actually put more of that mattifying, and then in the drier areas you can use more of like that satin finish or something that has more liquid hydrating formulation. So I know it sounds like a pain in the butt to do two formulations, but again, it's preference and how much time you're willing to put into your routine for your makeup.
Well, a lot of times you do kind of set your liquid foundation with a little bit of like some people use a translucent powder, which doesn't add a lot of powdery finish. It's just very light. But sometimes you do set your liquid foundation that might be a little bit more dewy with like a pressed powder foundation. So I could see how that would work out just fine.
Yes, if you want to just set the makeup, even if you're on the dry side, a translucent is so light and airy, it shouldn't settle into the fine lines and wrinkles, especially if it's like a mineral-based product. Like the translucent you were saying it's perfect for any skin type to set the makeup. Exactly. And then after the combination skin, if you find you're more on the sensitive side or you're acne prone, then you definitely want to stay away from things that have fragrances. So you want it to be fragrance free, non-comedogenic. That's just a fancy word meaning it won't clog your pores. Because of course in other episodes we've talked about what happens when your pores get clogged up, right? Especially when you have acne skin. So sensitive acne skin, you definitely want to stay away from non-comedogenic ingredients. Mineral base is probably your best bet for sensitive or acne skin, because minerals have a lot of good beneficial ingredients in there, a lot of healing properties with minerals, and they're more water-based, and they can be on the liquid as well. So if you're sensitive or acneic, gravitate towards those mineral types of foundations, but always patch test. And when you're patch testing, that's something that's going to be on your face. The best place to patch test is behind the ear, because the pH is similar to the rest of the face. So if you're going to react back here, you're going to definitely react on the face, especially if you have the sensitive skin. And when I say sensitive, I'm talking about people who have maybe topical dermatitis, maybe you have rosacea, some type of skin condition that has inflammation associated with it. So you always want to patch test, even if it's, I know you think skincare, you want to patch test, but also foundations and other makeup. You also want to patch test as well. So I think we covered it. Oily, dry, combination, sensitive.
So for those of you who don't know, Monina actually makes her own foundation, custom blends her own foundation, and it's not only to shade match, which I feel like there have been other companies in the past that do that, but mostly to match the shade, which is a huge hurdle to overcome.
Definitely.
When you're looking for a foundation. I've wasted so much money. I don't even want to go there, but I've wasted a lot of money like looking for the perfect foundation color, and not to mention all the other things.
Right.
So going back to what Monina can do is, if you have the desire to have the most perfect color foundation, and not only does she color match, but she also adds all these different botanicals in depending on your skin type and SPF. Talk a little bit about the custom blend foundation.
Yeah, basically everything I just told you to look for in a foundation, we do step by step in a methodical way.
Yeah.
And just like you, when you come up with someone's formulation for their hair color and you write it all down, I do the same. So I ask the person what kind of coverage do they want, what kind of finish do they want. I look at their skin type, and then I can actually add skin ingredients. And it's a mineral base, so it's very safe for people with sensitive or acneic skin, but it's good for anybody, whether you have oily skin, combination skin, or dry skin. And then we color match it, because I also have things called toners, which if you've colored your hair, you understand what a toner does. But I have toners that will help neutralize things like redness on the skin, or I can add a toner to break down if the foundation's a little too pink or a little too yellow. But yeah, basically it's your dream foundation in a bottle. And then we address the skin. We can add oil control, skin ingredients to it. We can also add something called a beauty balm, so we can turn into what we call a beauty or a BB cream.
You control the coverage level on top of everything else.
Coverage
so you can have,
level,
like you said, like as light of a coverage as a BB cream, which is like a tinted moisturizer per se, all the way up to like full coverage to like even be able to cover like a tattoo with.
We can increase the coverage to the point where if you've got like a discoloration or pigmentation or a scar, or like you said, tattoos, we can help cover that as well.
And it's a liquid or a powder, right? Because you still do the powders as well.
Yes, we still do powders. That's because the minerals that we're working with, there's also an option where they've turned it into what the aqueous form. So then we basically have a mineral in a liquid foundation. So yeah.
So anyway, just a little plug there in case anyone wants to get your own personalized, perfect color match with everything that you need. Monina will link in the show notes how to get a hold of her for that.
Yeah, and you don't have to be in person. It'd be lovely if you're here in the Bay Area and you come in to my studio, but I've been able to do these consultations over Zoom, and we've been able to do the color match just by doing a Zoom call as well.
Yeah.
So I would love for that.
Yeah.
Please let me know. And then I do have one more pro tip. So we talked about the foundation, but if you want to elevate your foundation to a pro level, always start with a good skin routine, obviously. Before you put on your foundation, you want to cleanse, tone, moisturize, and then use the appropriate primers. In another episode, we talked a lot about primers and skincare. And then you want to set the whole thing with setting spray so that it lasts all day, no matter what your skin type is. You always want to set it with the setting spray. So,
and we'll also link whatever Monina recommends in the show notes.
Yeah.
I've actually gotten some feedback saying that we need recommendations, like specific recommendations. Okay. So we'll be better about that, and we'll definitely link it in the show notes for this episode. Okay, I have one more question, and this is a question from our listener. So the question is, what is the best way to apply foundation? Because there's all kinds of ways. Now I'll tell you my favorite way.
What's your favorite way?
My favorite way is, I do this for all of my skincare as well. I put the bottle directly onto my face, and I pump like at least 5 times the amount that I would actually need, and watch it drip down my face before I then swirl it around with a brush. So tell me, is that wrong?
Oh my gosh, are you like trying to do a TikTok video for me right now?
Yeah, is that like not the most ludicrous? I know it's like for the gram, or for TikTok.
I'm sure you've all seen the liquid dripping all over the face. Yeah.
Yeah, not necessary.
Not necessary.
No.
Very much good for show, but
very much a waste of your product.
Yeah, don't put that much on. Definitely, you don't need that much. But to answer your question, depending on the formulation, if it's liquid or a cream, I always suggest use a brush. But a synthetic brush. And the reason being is, if you use regular hairbrush and you try to dip that into something wet, it just clumps and stays on the hair and doesn't really transfer onto the skin. But if you're doing a synthetic brush, the synthetic brush picks it up and then lays it back down on the face evenly. Yeah. And the reason I suggest using a brush as opposed to your fingers, again, this is all just tips from me, but if you are at home and you just don't want to use a brush, I mean, obviously you can use your fingers, but I find that when I use a brush, I actually use less product. Yeah, because I feel like when I put it in my hand, I end up using I always end up pumping too much into my hand, and then it's just a waste of product.
Okay.
Whereas if I just use my brush, and then I do what I call working in zones of your face. So apply a little bit into this area and then work it, then apply a little bit to the other area and then work that. Because if you start here and then you start moving it with the brush, you end up with less on the other side than you did where you started from.
Okay.
Yeah, so I like to kind of add it to the area I want, brush it out, buff it out, do all the things that you need to, and then move on to the other part of the face. So with liquids, I would say a brush or a blending sponge.
Okay.
Those are my 2 favorites for liquids. And creams, so anything wet, basically.
I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned a hair brush. Now, I know you.
Did I say hairbrush?
Well,
oh my gosh.
You didn't. You said hairbrush, but
hair.
I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
Because but I just want you to clarify that we're not talking about an actual brush that you would use in your hair.
Right. Okay.
You're talking about natural
hair brush, as far as like makeup brushes.
Right. Makeup brush made with like
boar hair. Yes. Because if you've looked at your a brush set before, there's ones that we call synthetic, which is like it's a synthetic material, as opposed to like the natural boar hairs that like for a powder,
like a kabuki
or a powder brush or your blush brush. Those are natural like boar hair or natural hair, as opposed to synthetic. Exactly.
Yeah, by the way, that might not be something that people really know to be obvious, that liquids use synthetic bristles for liquids, and boar hair natural brush bristles for powders.
For powders, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and trust me, you it's a lot easier to clean too.
Yeah.
A synthetic brush as opposed to putting your natural hairbrush into something wet. Yeah.
Right, because it just kind of clumps up.
Yes.
It doesn't spread.
It doesn't spread, exactly.
Because it like absorbs it.
Right, exactly. Okay, so those are your wet foundations. Your dry powder or your loose powder or your pressed powder, obviously you want to use either a brush or a lot of these foundations, like your pressed powders usually come with a little compact, a little puff,
Mm-hmm.
like a powder puff. The difference between doing the powder puff and the brush is the bigger or fluffier the brush is, the less it's going to pick up and the less it's going to apply. So if you just want to use like your setting powder, you want to use your biggest, fluffiest brush because it's going to deposit less. If you want to, I don't know if people even use this term anymore, but baking, remember baking?
Oh, yeah.
Under the eyes, so you want to put a more concentrated amount, then you would either use a really tight, dense brush or use your powder puff because you're picking up way more and depositing more. So that's the difference between using the powder puff as opposed to the different types of brushes.
Okay.
So I hope that made sense.
Yeah, no, that was great.
Okay.
Well, is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I think that was it. But if I left anything out or you still have a burning question about foundations, please reach out to us and let us know anytime.
Yeah, hopefully this alleviates some anxiety when you go to try. And you know, trying to pick a drugstore foundation out is always going to be more of a challenge because you can't try them on.
Try them, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little bit harder. That's why go ahead and use the 5 things I talked about. Look at the coverage. Think about your skin type. Think about the lifestyle or climate you live in. If you're worried about flash photography, and then color matching. Color matching is going to be tough when you can't test it out, but you know, the best thing you can do is hold that bottle.
It's so inaccurate too.
I know.
Just, you know what? Just forget all of that because you're going to waste so much money that way. That's where I wasted money.
It's hard.
At
It's tough.
You know, trying to go a little bit cheaper, but just have Monina make you a custom blend. It's like, honestly,
would love to.
it's really just the best way to go. Okay, well, thank you so much again for hanging out with us week after week. I'm Velia.
I'm Monina.
And until next time, keep experimenting with your beauty routine. All right, we're rolling. Rolling, rolling, rolling. Ready?
Okay, ready. Cheesy.
And cheesy.
Are you gonna say the line?
Yeah,
Okay.
I want to.